To make this taste like lemonade, we add some lemon. And also because it's disgusting to have 400 grams of sugar, and the lemon makes it refreshing. We should have a YouTube series, Nutrition with Tina. Hi lovely people, we are back with another YouTube video. It's been a long time of silence, mainly because both Ollie and I have been incredibly busy. I've just had a crazy work, sport, travel situation going on, but I'm having a bit of a mini break halfway through the season before some major next big races, so just taking this opportunity to talk a bit about what happened, and particularly, instead of making it a sort of a race recap, because I've done 4 major races this year so far, between May and July, to actually talk a bit about some of the lessons learned in my first few months of being a pro, and also some takeaways and what it's really like to find your feet in a rather difficult scene at the moment, where there's a lot of talent, loads of new people, new pros are joining the field, and like you're just like one of many. So yeah, I just thought I'd share a bit about my journey last few months, and then we sort of dive into some of my lessons learned from starting off as a pro. And also maybe a bit of a discussion around whether you should be taking a pro license, because I've been talking to a couple of girls and other people recently who are sort of having this issue, so I thought I'd share a couple of my reflections. It's been about 2 months since we've done our last YouTube video, actually maybe 3 months. Our last YouTube video was about our training camp. Since then, I've been in the middle of race season, so I've gone over to Germany for my first 70.3 race for Ironman Kraichgau. That was back in May. And then I've come back 2 weeks after to do Challenge Wales, which is a bit more of a local race, also 70.3 here in the UK. Only 3 or 4 weeks after that, I was then planning on doing Ironman Swansea. That didn't happen. Instead, I ended up doing the British Middle Distance Champs in Ironbourne. Bit of a story, I'll just touch on that soon. And 2 weeks after that, I did Alpe US long distance triathlon, the most extreme and crazy race I've ever done in my life. So just like briefly touching on some of those races, because they will relate a lot to sort of some of my lessons learned. So obviously coming into sort of pro triathlon, you might already have a pedigree of some successful racing, right? I've moved sort of the ranks quite quickly from being like a university athlete to doing age group triathlon to getting my pro license pretty much 3 races after I did my first 70.3, right? So it's been quite a quick process, but most of the times when people come into professional triathlon, they're already fairly good at what they do, right? But actually, it's quite a big step up. And like the first few races of the season really made me realize that. I thought, I'm going to be doing really well. I'm an incredibly good cyclist, which I still think I am. But pro triathlon in middle distance is a bit of a self-selective group. Like literally everyone in there is going to be very good cyclists. Everyone in there is going to be able to run well off the bike, put a decent swim in. So for this year, my whole ambitions and my whole plans were like do some races that fit into my calendar around my busy work schedule. And try and like learn as much from them as I can. This is really a year of finding my feet. So I went to Kraichgau for my first middle distance race. I'm quite excited for that one. Didn't have any expectations in terms of position, but just wanted to like deliver a decent race. I was a bit race rusty at the time, just because I hadn't raced in months since I'm in Weymouth last year. So just went into there trying to sort of deliver a race, put it all together. Had a brilliant swim, came out of the water third, actually putting some of the really famous triathletes on my feed. Did a decent bike, maybe not as good as I wanted to, but also was sort of playing around with fuel, just trying to figure out new sort of fueling techniques, enough hydration, so loads of homework that I was trying to do in my racing itself. And then onto the run, I was faced with one of my major issues. My feet really started swelling on the bike. I got horrific blisters, and it was a hell of a 21k run, so I really had to push through. Wanted to stop a few times just because my feet were like torn into shreds, and managed to come to the finish line, finish in 8th. So first top 10 position at my first pro race. I was happy with that. Could have done better with better shoes, probably, but you're racing the race you're in. So that was a major lesson learned, that I needed bigger shoes when I race in hot climates. Despite being in May and in Germany, it was an incredibly hot race. So I didn't really know what that was going to be like, because most of the races I've done are in the UK and I haven't had those issues. But black cycling shoes on the bike, my feet already started swelling, onto the run, shoes that are slightly a bit too tight. Yeah, it was a recipe for disaster. So that was a lesson learned. Came back to the UK, sorted out some of those material issues, did run analyses, run shop, So that was brilliant. So the first race already showed that I need to sort of work a bit on my equipment. The stuff that I was using back in the day, some of it is quite old, some of it needs some amendments, and not all races and all conditions require the same kind of equipment. So that race really made me aware of that. It also made me aware of the fact that in most cases, in a middle distance race, things don't go to plan. Like, it's very rare that you have a perfect race and you just got to race the race you're in, no matter how it's going, right? I had a few moments on the run where I was really like just wanting to step off the course, but just like keeping going, taking one step at a time, one aid session at a time. That sort of really helped me to refine my mental strategy of how to do a race. So yeah, came back, horrible blisters for 2 or 3 weeks, meant I couldn't really run, barely any running in the lead up to Challenge Wales, my second race of the season. Back into my full-time job as well, back from a long trip to Europe, and yeah, things just didn't go very well in Wales. I had my first DNF, which I'm actually quite indifferent about. It's what happened. I know there's this whole talk about death before DNF. That's not how I see it. Essentially what happened, I was incredibly mentally drained before the race, but sort of wanted to do it because I'd put it on my season calendar. It was convenient, it was nearby, not so strong of a field, so potentially a race for a podium. But in the race itself, I had so little mental energy. I think coming back from Kraichgau, getting back into my job, and also being at a very, very busy period of university life. So I was supervising students, we were finishing field trips, so much going on. I had very little mental capacity to absorb the racing and like to actually just like put it all in and like push myself very hard. So that's another lesson learned. Life looks different for every person and our season calendar, so we need to be very conscious of how we sort of approach that and what good time is to plan different races. I mean, full-time pros who really do this and nothing else have the luxury that they can sort of pick their season according to the races they want to do, right? They can arrange their travels around it and so on. Most pros and most sort of semi-pros sort of newly getting into the sport will have this issue of having other commitments, work commitments, field trips they have to go on, business travel and so on, right? I started a new job in January and sort of came in with the expectation that from May, June, July onwards, sort of university term was finished and I would be able to like work from home and like have a lot of mental space for sports, but that's just not how it was. I scheduled way too many races early on in the season where actually everything was way too busy and it was really crunch time work-wise, and it just meant I didn't really have the mental capacity to race really well. And actually in this case I just was drained from the start of the race, and like after sort of 5 or 6k to the run course I just stepped off the course and was like, I just really don't want to be here. So yeah, bit of a lesson learned there. Sometimes you just need to listen to your body, and when the stars are not aligned before a race, there might be in some cases reason to push through, but actually in my case I should have just listened to it and prioritized other race related on the line. Also the back-to-back racing that early in the season with only like 11 days in between probably was a bit too tight, but you live and you learn. And from there, I then was going to sign up for Ironman 70.3 Swansea. But because after Challenge Wales, sort of, I didn't feel very great. I had really needed a bit of a period to just recover and like have a bit of a reset, despite this being very early on in the season. I decided I wasn't going to sign up for Ironman Swansea, which in hindsight probably a bit of a mistake. Because in the end I did want to race and they wouldn't allow me a last minute entry, unfortunately, 5 days before. It's a bit of a shame. But essentially, after Challenge Wales, I went on a little training camp to the Alps. So I met my parents there, did a lot of cycling, mostly with a view on preparing for the US triathlon, sort of do some long climbs, recce the course, do some running at altitude and all those sort of things, just to like get some of the race specifics and like some of the specificity for the actual race. And I came back from that 10-day training camp, had a bit of a holiday, sort of 4 or 5 days in the way that I wasn't working. The other sort of 5 or 6 days I was still finishing a grant proposal. So life stress is always sort of a constant for me that I need to manage very carefully, and that like in many ways influences sort of how well I absorb training and also how much I can put into races. Sort of came back from the training camp, felt great, and actually decided I want to race Swansea. So called my coach. Coach was happy with it. Tried to sign up. It was too late. Swansea wouldn't allow me to enter, which is a bit of a shame because in the end 6 or 7 women raced. And it would have just been a great opportunity for a race. It would have probably suited my abilities, sort of challenging, rolling bike course, flat run, nice sea swim. So it sounded like a nice race. I'm keen to do that next year. But instead, actually, I ended up doing a bit of a girls' weekend with my friend Kelly. We went out to Ironbourne, which is a local race here in Eastbourne. It's a bit of a bucket list race in the UK. Very scenic scenic bike course through the South Downs, a nice run on the promenade, a lot of sort of spectator support. And yeah, we ended up doing that race. This is a race for age groupers and elite people. And it was also the British Middle Distance Champs, and I went into it with no expectations, just as a race to sort of practice some more racecraft, some strategy, and put a decent performance together. Particularly, I wanted to work on that run of the bike, see, well, how do my shoes and my feet, how do they do on a hot day? It was really warm. It was 35 degrees Celsius. And for me, it was like a no-pressure race, just try and get all the specifics of the race right, swim a proper swim, fuel well on the bike, hydrate, try and sort of play with that 12-meter draft distance, try and get onto like a pace line, be efficient on the bike, not just like empty the tank, but get onto the run in a good position to still deliver a good run. And yeah, I ran a half marathon PB of the bike, 1:27. I also had an overall 70.3 PB, and that was in a race without pressure, without tapering. So that was a wonderful little confidence boost and a bit of a reminder that I'm actually quite good at what I do, despite me often having doubts, right? And I think doubts are like one of the main things that sort of sometimes creeps into my thoughts as I sort of approach and sort of live this season. It's a bit of a roller coaster, right? Not every race goes perfectly. Like, you sometimes have a bit of a disaster, you come back from it. When you have a disaster, you're wondering, well, should I be here? Shouldn't I just be racing as an age grouper? But then literally every race I did this year, I would have overall, by a significant margin, won the overall age group prize. So yes, I shouldn't be racing as an age group. I'm at that level where I'm racing as a pro, but more like a sort of a top 10 kind of pro, not a pro who can currently get onto the podium. But hopefully that will change. So yeah, in Ironborn, had a great experience, had a great run, just had a really nice time as well, like take perspective and stock of everything, and just like actually just like indulging in that community spirit at the finish line, and it was brilliant. And this was also a pro license qualifier race, so some other girls there were doing it to qualify for a pro license, so we had some chats about it, and sort of the general sense that I got is that loads of people are quite cautious. They still have full-time jobs and not sure, should I be stepping up to the pro game? And yeah, it's a tricky question, and everyone has to decide that for themselves, but I think if you want to push the limits, you want to find out more about yourself, and you want to race triathlon at the highest level, then yes, you should step up to racing as a pro, even if it's only for a season. It will allow you a totally different sense of racecraft. It will maybe also reframe your mind and your focus on sort of restructuring your life a bit more around training, even if it means you're still working full time. You might prioritize differently, you might focus more on recovery. So I think it does change the attitude of how you approach the sport, even if you're technically still training in the framework of an age grouper, right? Which is the case for me, but I think it's definitely worth it. It's a very exciting year. You see a very different side of the sport, and yeah, ultimately you'll learn a lot about yourself. So yeah, came back from Ironborn, quite happy, quite stoked. 10 days later it was going to be Alpe d'Huez, which is a bit of an extreme race, to be frank. It's essentially in the French Alps, you swim 2k in a lake, then it's 120k on the bike, you go up 3 mega mountain passes, you finish on top of Alpe d'Huez, and on top you have a climb at 2,000 meter elevation, so an altitude run. So yeah, a bit of an extreme race. It was meant to be one of my sort of major races of the season. And yeah, again, it was fine. I finished top 10. I finished 8th person. Yeah, things didn't go to plan. I had a great plan of how hard I wanted to ride on the bike, of how I wanted to run. We were quite prepped before the race in terms of being quite acclimatized to the altitude, because we were living on Alpe d'Huez at 2,000 meters for like 4 or 5 days. So I wasn't breathing that heavy anymore. My body was sort of adapting. But one of the major issues was that I essentially got punched so hard on the nose on the bike that the race was a bit of a struggle from the very start. It just like really knocked me out. So I had a bit of a panic moment in the swim, which I've never had, because I've always been comfortable swimming around people, but like that elbow in my face was just like such a blow that sort of the very start it was just like, oh gosh, I just need to get through this. So again, one of those cases where plans change and you need to adapt. I then sort of took the bike ride a bit more like a bit more sportive in the point of view that I wanted to like get through it, enjoy it, have fun, chat to people. So despite this being quite a fierce competition, this is ultimately a 7-hour race, right? So you can't just like be lonely for 7 hours. I'm quite a sort of communal person, so I found some really lovely people to cycle some of the uphills with. So that was nice, and that just gave the whole event a different spirit. On the run, I felt very drained. So this being obviously much, much longer than most middle distance races I've done, I just don't know my body yet. After sort of 5 or 6 hours of racing, so coming off the bike after pretty much 5.5 hours, it was a very different energetic state to what I had experienced before. And the first lap on the run, it was 3 laps, I really struggled. I had to walk a few times. Some of the uphills, like my body was sort of going into overdrive, and I was really overwhelmed, and yeah, I just couldn't execute what I wanted to. met Ollie, met my partner at the end of the first lap, sort of almost wanted to pull out, and he was like, no, continue, do another lap. And yeah, I did continue. I eventually found my stride. So it was some sort of metabolic shift, something going on in my body that I just had an experience that I hadn't really been expecting. But I thought I coped very well in the end, did a really good second and third lap, and yeah, didn't lose any positions on the run, didn't gain any positions, but did one of the most extreme triathlons in the world. So crossed the finish line in 8th. It was a big, big, big relief. And in that race as well, I managed to sort of implement some more lessons and do some more homework. So particularly, I was working on cooling. 7.5 hours of racing with the race that starts at 9 a.m. means you're essentially racing all the way through the worst heat of the day. So for that race, my homework was cooling. So at every aid station, I was grabbing 1 bottle of electrolytes and 1 bottle of water over my head. So for pretty much the whole race, I was just soaked. And it made actually such a difference. I didn't have any sort of heart rate disasters. But yeah, I'm still sort of learning to judge my body in a race that is sort of 7-8 hours long, which is going to be interesting in the scheme of sort of full distance, which we might approaching soon. So yeah, Alpe d'Huez, great event, fabulous to get out there. It's really like a festival of sport, incredibly enjoyable if you can ever get the chance to do it. Fabulous. They have a middle distance race, a medium distance race, which is more like an Olympics distance. They have kids races. They have a duathlon, so you don't need to do this mega 7 to 10 hour race that I've been doing. You can pick something shorter as well, something more pace. But I also needed a bit of a mid-season break, just reset the mind, reset the spirit before we going into another sort of 4-week block. And I think that's another really important lesson to learn, is like judging when is your body and your mind a bit overwhelmed, when you need to take a bit of a mini break, right? I mean, coaches talk about this in terms of periodization, maybe having 3 hard weeks, 1 easy week. But even when you have a long racing season, and I've gone from racing essentially loads of short distance sprint races and maybe 1 70.3 a year to now racing 6 or 7 70.3s and like even longer distance races like Alpe d'Huez, right? So it's tiring for the mind to sort of gather your energy and push hard for 4.5 to 5 hours, right? So yeah, we had a bit of a mid-season break, which was fantastic. I did a lot of allotmenting and like caught up on some work things. And yeah, that just felt like a bit of a reset. And now we are into the next block of training, building towards Zell am See, which is probably the biggest race I'm doing this season. Strongest strength of field score. It's an Ironman Pro Series race. It's already sold out for the pro field for a while. Loads of prominent pros are on the waiting list and not managing to get a spot. But luckily I signed up early enough. So we'll be doing that. My partner Ollie will also be doing the race. So that would be quite interesting. And yeah, now that I've done 4 or 5 races, I have more little lessons that I wanna do, right? There's more refinement. But one of the big key takeaways this year is just from race to race, you refine little things, and like to really get a competitive edge, obviously you got to train well, you got to recover well, but you also have to manage yourself very well in races. And that's really a thing that I've learned, that the whole element of cooling, nutrition, hydration, how do you mentally prepare yourself for a race? How do you want to do the lead-in into the race in terms of work, in terms of life stress, and so on? So it's a few things I want to try for Zell am See. We are, again, going to be doing this as a bit of a little holiday before, so hopefully then my body will be quite de-stressed the days leading into Zell am See. And then after that, I will go into racing German National League, the German Championships, which is a sprint distance race. So it's going to be fun to do a race that only lasts an hour and just push really hard. So yeah, into this little build. Now for me, it's really about getting some of the fundamentals of my training sort of sharpened up again, staying on top of my strengths and conditioning. Obviously that is difficult sometimes to maintain during the season with lots of traveling and tapering and so on. So together with my physio Jordan and my S&C coach, we've been refining a strength program, just like working on some of those injury prone areas, sort of getting some good functional strength back. I'm also going to be focusing on doing a good running block, doing my long runs, doing my track sessions and my sort of progressive tempo runs, which have been working very well, because that's something that obviously with this whole blister issue I've had, I haven't been able to build towards. And then I just hope to be able to execute a really, really good race. And if I won't, well, hopefully I have more opportunities, just like treat the race as what it is, try and really enjoy it, because that's something that sometimes can get lost, right? You're like in the heat of the moment, you might not be doing as well as you want, but actually you're doing what you love. You're out there in a fantastic location. So I'm trying to maintain that perspective and just like, yeah, neaten up some of my processes. So yeah, all in all, it's been a wonderful first half year. It's been tough at times. It's obviously the whole financial side that we'll probably touch on in another YouTube video. It's not particularly cheap with the racing, the traveling, even though we're trying to do it almost on a budget. If you don't consistently get into the sort of the top 7 or 8 and ideally the top 3 or 4, you're not making that much money back from it, right? So yeah, we're sort of trying to also strategically see for next year what are the kind of races where I can be doing a bit better. I've been choosing notoriously tough races this year with very hard bike courses, very hilly runs. Potentially not the thing that suits me and me the best. I'm a very, very tall, muscular triathlete, so it's probably not the best for me to do like these races that are like very, where you have to defeat gravity a lot of times. So I think I might focus on sort of some more like flatter, faster triathlons with like faster runs. I think that probably suits me a bit better. Just like trying to do the race that I enjoy, right? There's no point in you trying to do these extreme races when actually you might not be enjoying the certain elements of the race. Like I found that in many races I've done this year, there's loads of like sort of out and back loops, and like I actually don't enjoy that. I want to do races that feel like a bit of an adventure. So some interesting takeaways for next year and for the rest of the year. So hopefully you enjoyed this YouTube video. If you have got any questions, just post them in the comments.